Hello there, you're watching All 24 News, World News program with me, Karim Zachary, and up next are the top stories. From the 4th African Startup Conference, President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune calls for a continental system to boost entrepreneurship and reiterates Algeria's strong commitment to Africa and a unified tech market. Also in our news, at the UN, the Polisario representative refutes the Moroccan occupiers' claims, calling the denial of Sahrawi rights baseless. Somalia denies reports it recognized, Morocco's alleged sovereignty, and Rabat fails to secure similar recognition from Spain. And in Gaza, Zionist forces step up violations as home demolitions intensify. 5 Palestinians, including a paramedic, are killed in northern Gaza, while Qatar says talks to end the war have reached a critical phase. And Kiev accuses Moscow of hitting energy sites across 8 regions, while Ukrainian strikes hit the Ryazan oil refinery in Luhansk, and the IAEA warns of rising nuclear risks at Zaporizhia and Chernobyl. The details are right up. Welcome back to the details. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, the 4th African Startup Conference has kicked off in Algiers, bringing together thousands of entrepreneurs, investors, and experts from across the continent and beyond. With Rwanda as the guest of honor, over 25,000 participants are taking part, including more than 35 ministerial delegations and 200 exhibitors. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune, through Prime Minister Sifi Gharieb, called for a continental system to boost entrepreneurship and support Africa's youth, hoping the conference will deliver real results to drive growth and innovation across the continent.
We're honored to invite His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Algeria.
ويأتي مؤتمركم اليوم لتعزيز ما تحقق وتوسيع.
Your conference today comes to reinforce what has been achieved and to expand the horizons of joint action. On this occasion, as I invite you to engage in an in-depth discussion on the best ways to build a continental system capable of supporting and expanding entrepreneurship across the continent, I thank you all for your participation, appreciating the efforts of everyone who contributed to organizing this important continental event. I also thank the brotherly and friendly countries for their presence and support, and I am certain that the work of this edition will be crowned with tangible results that support our youth and advance the development path of our continent toward broader horizons.
الإفريقي للمؤسسات الناشئة.
On the same occasion, President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune highlighted Algeria's dedication to strengthening continental cooperation with a focus on sustainability, effectiveness, and entrepreneurship. He noted that hosting the African Startup Conference just 3 months after the Intra-African Trade Fair reflects Algeria's commitment to Africa's development. Abdelmajid Tebboune also renewed his goal of reaching 20,000 startups in Algeria by 2029, aiming to extend the country's ambitions beyond its borders and help build a unified African tech market.
لدى شركائنا في القارة وخارجها. لقد اخترتم لهذه الطبعة إن هذا المؤتمر.
This conference for entrepreneurs and startups embodies the ambitious spirit of Africa and aims to inspire a new generation of entrepreneurs capable of competing globally and of reinforcing the technological and economic sovereignty of our continent. Algeria, as it hosts this event, which reflects its commitment to enhancing continental cooperation based on sustainability and effectiveness, is convinced that Africa is rich in human resources capable of leading economic transformation and empowering entrepreneurial initiatives. The fact that this conference is being held just 3 months after the organization of the Intra-African Trade Fair 2025 by Algeria confirms our deep commitment to serving Africa and reflects our desire for Algeria to be a leading destination for innovation and economic integration in our continent.
وللتكامل الاقتصادي في قارتنا.
The African Union's Deputy Chairperson, Salma Malika Haddadi, praised Algeria for its regular and successful hosting of the African Startup Conference. She said the event highlights Africa's commitment to modern technologies, entrepreneurship, and building the continent's future through innovation and industry. Haddadi also commended the Algerian government for its excellent preparation, professionalism, and the thoughtful choice of this year's theme.
ولقد جسد تنظيم الجزائر الدوري والناجح.
The regular and successful organization by Algeria of this major African event demonstrates the importance of our continent, attaches to new technologies and startups while highlighting the desire of African countries to build their future by themselves by investing boldly and wisely in innovation, creativity and industry.
On the same occasion and in a statement to our channel, African Union Vice President Salma Haddadi said Algeria's initiative and integration projects are a model for Africa's development agenda.
The African Union views the integration initiative and projects led by Algeria as efforts aimed at renewing the continental development agenda, whether through infrastructure development, investment in African students, or other fields. These Algerian initiatives reflect the policy and vision of the highest Algerian authorities to promote integration by encouraging each country to contribute according to its capabilities. Algeria has devoted major efforts in this regard with the objective of achieving continental complementarity and integration.
The World Bank's Vice President for North Africa and the Middle East, Ousmane Diane, in a statement to our channel, he said the latest report on Algeria's economy is highly significant.
Regarding the World Bank Economic Growth Report for Algeria, which was just released, I find it highly significant in the current economic context of Algeria. Looking at economic growth in the regional and global environment, the figures Algeria achieved in the first quarter are very encouraging, with a growth rate of 4.1%. This is solid growth, and it looks even better when we consider the non-hydrocarbon sectors, which show a growth rate of 5.1%.
And to have more insights about key players in the 4th African Startup Conference, here's a report by Karim Mustafa. Let's follow.
Algiers hosts Africa's biggest forum on startups and entrepreneurship. Over the next 2 days, the Algerian capital will focus on innovation under the theme Raising African Champions, with Rwanda as the guest of honor. This major event features discussions, sessions and workshops on topics related to innovation, scientific research, content creation and artificial intelligence.
Africa is changing our skills today, and our startups are now capable of innovating and changing the future of this continent through a new economic model. And this forum is one of the most important axes. Today we are well aware that Africa's future depends on the ability of its startups and young people to innovate and develop.
The 3-day forum offers African young entrepreneurs the opportunity to connect with international institutions.
We are delighted to be here today at this event, which aims to position Algeria as a technology hub in Africa. It's great that this event is taking place here in Algeria because it allows us to discover the startups that are operating here. I'm a member of the Permanent Secretariat of the African Startup Conference, so I regularly come to Algeria to participate in this event. It is an important event because we have the mission to support our startups.
With its 4th edition, this forum consolidates the role of Algeria as a leading country in developing the innovation ecosystem and reinforces the inter-African cooperation in the field of startups.
And in another story, the Polisario Front's UN representative Sidi Mohamed Omar has called out Morocco over its claims on the latest Security Council resolution. Speaking to the Sahrawi news agency, Omar said the Moroccan foreign minister's suggestion that self-determination depends on parties signing an agreement is completely baseless, with no support in UN documents since the organization's founding.
First, the right to self-determination is a collective right of peoples, not a right of individuals or of parties, as falsely claimed by the foreign minister of the occupying state. Second, the right to self-determination is a preparatory norm of international law, which means it is a fundamental, inalienable, and non-derogable right. Third, the outcomes of the exercise of the right to self-determination by the people of a territory subject to decolonization are stipulated in UN General Assembly resolutions 1541 and 2625, which define the methods of implementing this right.
The Polisario Front's UN representative said Morocco's rewording of Sahrawi people as population in the resolution shows a colonial mindset, ignoring key United Nations decisions.
The denial by the foreign minister of the occupying state of the existence of the Sahrawi people explicitly mentioned in a UN Security Council resolution is not only an insult to everyone's intelligence but also a completely baseless claim. It may be useful to remind the foreign minister of the occupying state that the Fourth Committee of the UN General Assembly adopted, without a vote, on 16 October 2025, a resolution that once again reaffirmed not only the international status of Western Sahara as a decolonization issue, but also the responsibility of the UN toward the Sahrawi people.
The Sahrawi diplomat reminded the Moroccan foreign minister that he represents a repressive authoritarian regime and is the last person to speak on the rights of a people, popular will, or self-determination.
In reality, no one cares much about the claims of the Moroccan foreign minister or the colonialist language from which his biased interpretations are drawn. Simply put, he comes from a country where people are stripped of their sense of being a people and are forcibly reduced to mere subject, compelled to live under a medieval-style authoritarian regime based on slavery, repression of freedoms, and the trampling of human dignity and rights.
In another story, the Somali Ministry of Foreign Affairs has firmly denied claims that it recognizes Morocco's alleged sovereignty over Western Sahara. In a statement, Mogadishu emphasized that its positions are expressed only through official channels and highlighted the importance of the recent UN Security Council resolution. The ministry also called on Morocco and the Polisario Front to engage in serious, direct talks to reach a peaceful, mutually acceptable solution, fully backing the UN Secretary General and his envoy in relaunching the political process. And in another story, the Moroccan Makhzen failed in its push during a closed Madrid summit to get Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez to recognize its claimed sovereignty over Western Sahara in exchange for promises on Canary Island security and status. Here's Sofiane Kenturi.
Madrid and Rabat held a closed-door bilateral summit at the Moncloa Palace, ending only with a brief statement that, according to analysts, revealed a widening gap between the two countries over the Western Sahara issue. The talks highlighted the failure of Morocco's strategy to pressure Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez into recognizing full Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara in exchange for enhanced security cooperation for the Canary Islands and Spain's recognition of their territorial integrity. Spanish media framed the meeting as another setback for Rabat in its attempt to secure an official Spanish endorsement of what Madrid still considers a disputed territory and Africa's last colony. The newspaper Independiente reported, citing informed sources, that Morocco's efforts fell flat, noting that the summit concluded without a press conference or any formal statement from Sanchez. The paper added that Rabat's attempt to trade recognition of the Canary Islands' Spanish identity for Spanish support of its sovereignty claims over Western Sahara also failed to gain traction. Morocco's hope that Spain would move a step further than it did in 2022, when Madrid called Morocco's autonomy plan the most serious, credible, and realistic basis for resolving the conflict, clashed directly with Spain's reaffirmation of UN Security Council Resolution 2797, adopted on October 31, 2025. The resolution maintains the historical and legal status of Western Sahara as a territory still under the framework of decolonization.
To the Gaza file now, 7 Palestinians were killed and several others were injured when Zionist forces struck displaced civilians in northern Gaza. Hospitals report 6 deaths and 3 injuries in Beit Lahia, Zaytun and Jabalia, while Gaza Civil Defense confirmed the death of one of its officers from Friday's airstrikes. The Palestinian Ministry of Health, meanwhile, says that within 48 hours, 5 more bodies and 15 wounded arrived at hospitals, bringing the total since the ceasefire violations began to 367 martyrs and 953 injured. Overall, since October 7, 2023, over 70,000 Palestinians have been killed and more than 171,000 wounded in the ongoing genocide. Similarly, the occupation forces continued to breach the ceasefire in Gaza, carrying out heavy airstrikes and demolition buildings across the Strip. Explosions were reported near Borage refugee camp, while tanks fired stun grenades over Sheikh Nasser in Khan Yunis, and at the same time, gunfire and demolitions hit Zaytun east of Gaza City and the northern Gaza Strip. On a related note, Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani says negotiations over the Gaza war are at critical stage. Speaking at the Doha Forum, he stressed that mediators are pushing for the next phase of a ceasefire, which he says can only be complete with the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza.
Now, we are at a critical moment. It's not yet there. So it's what we have just done is a pause. We cannot consider it yet a ceasefire. A ceasefire cannot be completed unless there is a full withdrawal of the Israeli forces. There is stability back in Gaza. People can go in and out, which is not the case today.
Elsewhere in occupied Palestine, a large-scale raid by Zionist forces in the West Bank left several Palestinians injured, including a 20-day-old infant who suffocated from tear gas in Nablus. 3 young men from Ariha were also hurt during beatings, and at least 12 Palestinians, including a woman, were arrested in Ramallah, Al-Khalil, Al-Quds, and Qalqiliyah. Meanwhile, the UN Population Fund's representative, Nestor Omahangi, accused the Zionist entity of deliberately blocking UN staff, signing strict visa restrictions that hinder humanitarian work in the occupied territories. Elsewhere in the Middle East, on Saturday, Zionist forces stepped up their attacks in Syria, advancing into the countryside of Damascus. Local reports say tanks and armored vehicles moved into the area around Beit Jin, storming former military outposts and detonating ammunition nearby. In Morocco, activists and human rights advocates warned that Zionist influence has infiltrated key state institutions during a protest in front of parliament in Rabat, supporting Palestine and opposing normalizations. The demonstrators reaffirmed popular rejection of ties with the Zionist entity and accused the Makhzen regime of allowing infiltration across all sectors.
من قبل عتاة الإمبريالية العالمية.
Tunisian President Kais Saied said his country will not bow to what he called shadow lobbies. Speaking with Prime Minister Sarah Zafrani Zanzari on Friday, Saied stressed that the state is governed by a new constitution and the rule of law, leaving no room for interference in its institutions. Moving on to another topical development, Ukraine says Russia launched a major overnight attack, firing 653 drones and 51 missiles. Ukrainian forces report they intercepted 585 drones and 30 missiles, but shelling in Kherson still left 1 person dead and several others injured. Officials are saying the strike caused significant disruption, highlighting the ongoing intensity of the conflict. Meanwhile, Ukrainian authorities say Russian drones and missiles struck energy and transport infrastructure overnight in 8 regions, causing widespread power outages and disrupting water and heating supplies. Kiev faced a major attack targeting transport facilities, while Chernihiv, Zaporizhia, and Lviv, Dnipro, and Odessa also saw damage. Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha condemned the strikes, saying Russia is ignoring peace efforts and called on allies to act swiftly to strengthen Ukraine. In the same context, the IAEA confirmed that Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant briefly lost all off-site power overnight, though it was restored after about half an hour. Other lines remain disconnected. Meanwhile, the agency reported that the firewall at Chernobyl was damaged and no longer functioning, losing hence key safety protections. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi stressed the urgent need for a full overhaul to prevent further risks and ensure nuclear safety. Moving on to a related note, the G7 and the European Union are holding intensive talks on a possible full ban on maritime services that help transport Russian oil, seen as an alternative to the current price cap. Russia relies on Western tankers for over a third of its oil exports to markets like India and China. Meanwhile, Russia's ambassador to Germany warned that plans to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine could have serious consequences for the EU, harming its commercial reputation and sparking potential lawsuits. In the meantime, the U.S. State Department says Kiev and Moscow have agreed to keep talks ongoing to make real progress toward ending the war in Ukraine. Officials confirmed that both sides discussed a framework of arrangements and the deterrent measures needed for lasting peace. They stressed the importance of taking credible steps toward a ceasefire and de-escalation. And in a different story, Algerian Secretary of State in charge of the community abroad, Sofiane Shaib, highlighted the importance of engaging the national community abroad in the country's economic initiatives. Speaking via video conference at a meeting in Nice, he said his office is working with state sectors to support Algerians abroad, address their concerns, and enhance their contribution to development.
The project closest to my heart is establishing an institution or unit to help the citizens of my country, allowing them to benefit from my expertise in diabetes and metabolic diseases. I plan to implement this project in my hometown, Biskra.
I want to invest heavily in Algeria, especially through my expertise and funds, by building a workshop that will allow us to produce modular panels for rapid home construction, which can be ready in less than 3 months. Our project aims to speed up construction in Algeria, and we will also export our panels to Canada. I found this meeting very interesting, first and foremost, because it allows us to recognize the many platforms that provide everyone with effective access to information, and at the same time, to submit various models for investment in Algeria in collaboration with the organizations such as the Algerian Production Agency for Investments. My expertise focuses on clinical and therapeutic research. I would like to contribute it to the portfolio of university hospital centers in Algeria. I thank the Nice Consulate for this wonderful initiative, which encourages young project leaders to invest in Algeria.
To a different news story, in Sudan this time, the death toll from a drone strike by the Rapid Support Forces in Kalugi, South Kordofan, has risen to 114, with 71 others injured. The Health Ministry, meanwhile, is saying the numbers could climb further, blaming the RSF for deliberately targeting a kindergarten twice. Sudan's Foreign Ministry condemned the militia, calling coexistence is impossible and describing the Gallows forces as lacking any sense of humanity or law. For its part, the European Union has strongly condemned the attack on Kalugi, in South Kordofan by the Rapid Support Forces, which killed dozens, mostly children. EU Commissioner for Crisis Management Hadja Habib called it a clear war crime, stressing that targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure is strictly forbidden under international humanitarian law. Elsewhere in Africa, fighting flared again in eastern DR Congo on Friday, forcing hundreds of civilians to flee into Rwanda, just a day after a peace agreement was signed in Washington. Explosions shook buildings near the border town of Bugarama, with the M23 movement accusing Burundi's army of firing into Congolese territory. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres welcomed the agreement as a key step toward rebuilding trust between DR Congo and Rwanda, urging all parties to honor their commitments and continue efforts for lasting peace. Elsewhere, Venezuelan economists say years of U.S. economic sanctions, have severely held back the country's development, despite its vast oil reserves, that is. Ramiro Royro, an economist or economics professor at the Central University of Venezuela, pointed out that Venezuela's GDP remains in the middle to lower range in South America because of these long-standing sanctions. It is now time to catch up on more news stories making headlines in the News in Brief with Salman Asib this time.
South Africa's Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola said Saturday that no member can unilaterally remove South Africa from the G20, responding to U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's plan to invite Poland instead. Lamola rejected Washington's accusations and stressed that South Africa's G20 presidency prioritizes inclusion of African and Global South countries, adding that Pretoria remains open to dialogue. China's Premier He Lifeng and U.S. Treasury Secretary reaffirmed their commitment to continuing the China-U.S. economic and trade consultations. In a Friday video call that also included U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, they discussed implementing the president's understandings from Busan and addressing upcoming cooperation and mutual economic concerns. Afghan media reported on Saturday that 5 people were killed and others injured in a shootout on the border with Pakistan on Friday. According to the reports, Afghan and Pakistani forces exchanged heavy fire near the Spin Boldak border crossing in Afghanistan's southern Kandahar province, resulting in casualties amid mutual accusations by both governments, violating the ceasefire following renewed clashes in the border areas. More than 900 people have died due to floods and landslides that struck Indonesia's Sumatra Island in the west of the country. The National Disaster Management Agency said in a statement on Saturday that the death toll has reached 908, while over 400 others remain missing following a series of tropical storms and monsoon rains that hit the country.
And that's the end of our news. Thank you for watching and take care.